Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual industry panel on virtual design and construction and building information modeling. We are so happy to have four amazing professionals from PCL here with varied backgrounds, which we're going to hear about very soon as I introduce them. But I just want to start off by thanking you for attending this event, thanking our career education counselors for hosting this event, and just reminding you that we're going to put some links in the chat, but our CE counselors are here to help you with all of your career and academic and any sort of needs that you have as you navigate your time at GCC. We can help point you in the right direction. My name is Shelby. I am one of the career education counselors. We also have Brianna joining us today. And so without further ado, I will start to introduce our panelists by reading off their bios. So who is here with us today? I'm going to start with John.
Sure.
John Tochi Jr. serves as PCL's VDC Construction Manager, lending his technical and VDC experience to projects spanning throughout the firm's Southern California Buildings District. His project portfolio amounts to over $5 billion and includes a myriad of projects spanning life sciences, R&D, manufacturing, tech, higher education, and aviation markets, with projects located across the globe ranging from speculative core shell construction, interior build-outs for biotech startups, ground-up R&D and production facilities, campus expansion planning, which is happening here at GCC, and third-party audits of an owner's as an owner's consultant. John most recently has been working with the Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, filling a VDC and design management role for the $1.1 billion consolidated rent-a-car facility, as well as with UC San Diego to successfully deliver their recently completed marine conservation lab facility. John has a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Pepperdine University. I will move on next to Ryan Evanson. Ryan joined PCL Construction in 2020 and has worked on CONRAC and other projects within California for PCL. His expertise with survey, reality capture, and digital layout, VR, and 4D work planning, along with complicated MEP FP, I'll have to learn what that is, building systems coordination, make him an important part of multiple project teams and project pursuits. And then I will move on to Sydney Emmons. Sydney joined PCL in 2021. In the past 12 months, she's led to VDC effort on a variety of project design from San Diego to Los Angeles. Those project types range from institutional community service centers to clean room laboratory projects. Her capstone project for her Master's of Architecture at the University of Kansas was 12 units of prefabricated tiny houses for people experiencing homelessness in Lawrence, Kansas. And last but not least, I will introduce Dana Ritter. And Dana joined PCL in 2019 to work on the consolidated rent-a-car facility project at LAX. She holds a Master's of Architecture degree from the University of Kansas. Dana's project history includes over $1 billion in design and construction projects from the aviation, institutional, sports, entertainment, and high-end residential market sectors. Her architectural, technical, and assembly-minded skill sets, along with her attention to detail, is perfectly suited for her role in VDC. So as you can see, we have a variety of backgrounds, a variety of projects, real high numbers in the project capital that we've been seeing among these professionals, and some different backgrounds from Masters of Architecture to Bachelors in business. So I'm really excited to have these four panelists today. And in order to facilitate y'all introducing yourselves more than just me reading your bios, I'm actually going to jump ahead to introducing the first question and having you answer. Let's go ahead and try to keep that same order just so it's easy. So John can start us off, followed by Ryan, Sydney, and finishing off with Dana. And not every panelist has to answer every question. And just so the students attending know, we do have some pre-established questions. And at the end, you'll be able to bring in your own questions and talk to our panelists directly. So we're really excited for that as well. But to start us off, our number one question is to please share your education and career journey. What made you decide to pursue the career you currently have? And what road bumps did you overcome along the way? Starting with John. Oh, and I'll stop showing my screen here so we can all see each other.
Cool. Oh gosh. Let's see. So I grew up in New England. I I guess, a member of a third generation construction family. But I really wasn't into construction growing up, in the way that, like, I don't know, I didn't necessarily think that I was gonna, run a construction company or even work out on a job site. I thought, what the construction industry was doing seemed like pretty old fashioned and kind of painful. What the technology and everything else was primitive at best. And and it really didn't seem like a lot of fun. Um, and so I went to school for business administration. I did my freshman year at Northeastern University in downtown Boston. It was a great time. It was right after the Patriots won their first Super Bowl. And so we're not going to talk about how long ago that was, because it wasn't yesterday. But it was one of these things where I was living very close to home. And it was also just kind of brutal with New England winters. And I was like, what am I doing to myself? So, and I also wasn't necessarily getting a lot out of the courses I was taking. I remember having a macroeconomics class and finding the professor more confusing than my macroeconomics textbook. And what I ended up doing was taking a year off, and thinking like, okay, before I just do this for another 3 years or 4 years, because Northeastern was a co-op school on quarters. Before I do this for another 4 years, let me take stock of where I'm at and make sure, like, this is where I want to be doing it, and it's this is the degree I want to be doing. So I ended up deciding to transfer. My short list of schools were Pepperdine University or University of Hawaii. So I wasn't necessarily picking it for an academic program. I was more picking it for places that didn't have a winter. But fortunately for me, I ended up at Pepperdine University, fell in love with Southern California, and some of the more interesting stuff that has benefited me in my professional career has been a lot of the management theory and understanding how to work well with others. I don't always necessarily practice that, but it's I think a weakness that that a lot of managers don't necessarily understand, organizational behavior. And along the way, I also at Pepperdine picked up a lot of great skills around computer science. So with the comp sci courses, got to dig into database structure, understanding one-to-one, one-to-many relationships. Got very good with Excel, which Excel is an incredibly powerful tool. Don't let it scare you. But like, just learning kind of the basic business software was incredibly helpful, in ways that I didn't expect or know that I'd be using it, 10, 20 years later. But I think, is that a good summary of kind of the bumps and different things
Yes,
along the way?
definitely. It
Um,
definitely explains well and gives some
yeah,
extra tips on like what's memorable from your school
mhm,
experience and applies to
right.
your career.
So I think for me, it was taking classes on organizational behavior, business theory. I'll be honest, I didn't get a lot out of financial accounting, and I'm really learning how to dig into an SEC 10K filing to understand, the detailed earned income analysis of a made up company. But the more soft side of kind of being a strong management professional, and along with that, um, learning that it's okay to not know everything was some really cool stuff for me. I will say that as I transitioned into a professional career, it's interesting because I came in knowing less about the design process than probably anyone else around me, and certainly less than Sydney, Ryan, or Dana did when they started with PCL. I just had the distinct privilege of having a 10-year head start on them. But I will say that it's okay not to know everything when you're just starting out. And I think there's times where you feel like there's a huge expectation when you're early on in your career to not ask any questions because you should probably know this already and everyone else is nodding along. And so you probably should too. And that's totally not the case. It's absolutely okay to ask questions. And if you don't feel comfortable asking questions in a group, find a mentor, find somebody who you can pull off to the side and ask those questions to. I was fortunate to have a father who owns a construction company. And when I had questions that I didn't feel comfortable asking in the workplace, I could give my dad a call on my drive home from work and ask him those same questions. And it really helped me along in my career, but that was a little bit of an unfair advantage for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that tip about okay not to know. I think a lot of students have that expectation that they do have to know everything. So that's very relatable that you did too. And with that being said, we can switch over to Ryan. Ryan, if you're ready. If not, we'll jump over to Sydney.
I'm ready. Sorry, I don't have any video. Something wonky is going on with my webcam, but
No worries.
I'm Ryan Evanson. I've been with PCL since 2020, summer of 2020. I guess originally I grew up in Minnesota on a small rural town on a farm. So I kind of had that background of, we do everything ourselves, and always was fascinated with building, putting stuff together, because living on a farm, we kind of just did that if we needed a building. So taking that interest, I wanted to go into architecture. So I started looking into accredited architecture programs. I ended up going to the University of Kansas, like Dana and Sydney did. And for my 5th year's master project, just like Dana and Sydney, we built, designed, constructed basically a residential home for our capstone project. And PCL and John were interested in the program and visited us a few times. And even though we were architecture students, he kind of persuaded us to maybe see the other side of things in construction as VDC. So, COVID kind of came up and threw a lot of people's plans out of whack. So I thought, why not? I went to school to be an architect, but I'll give my shot at doing some VDC work. So came right out to Southern California after college and worked on the Conrack project for a majority of my time so far, but also worked on food processing plants, and a lot of pursuit work as well. Just having the architectural background, we help out on pursuits and nice looking renderings and that type of thing. So yeah, a year and a half into it, and kind of glad that I did choose this path, because it's been really rewarding for me.
That's fantastic. And with that being said, I'll switch it over to Sydney.
Hi. So as Ryan mentioned, I also went to the University of Kansas for architecture degree. And what got me into architecture was I was just really into design, and had always been into woodworking, which came from spending time with my grandfather. So that kind of just shot me into architecture. It seemed like a practical career. And then as I was going through architecture school, I was finding myself feeling like designing was not as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And so that was kind of something I struggled with, because I was like, I'm spending all this time and money for an architecture degree, but I don't know if it's the career I want. So doing my 5th year capstone as a design build studio, and learning that there's more than just design career for architects was enlightening. And so that's how I got into kind of wanting to be on the contracting side of things. And then luckily met John and got introduced to PCL and into virtual design and construction. And that's kind of how I ended up here. So I just graduated last May, a year ago. So I've been with PCL about 11 months now. So that's my story.
Oh, fantastic. I love how you shared like the personal start as well. And with our students here, just a reminder, it's great that we have some newer grads who can kind of share that transition from schools to the workforce. But before I talk too much, I'm going to pass it over for our last panelist for this first question to Dana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dana. I have a similar background to Ryan and Sydney. Went to University of Kansas for architecture. And before I actually did my capstone project, it was my 4th year. I had an internship at an architecture firm that was very design based, and I liked it. It was fun, but a part of me felt like I didn't know if I wanted to do design because I felt like all I was doing was making things look pretty. So that kind of shot me into 804, our studio group for our 5th year, where we designed and built 2 houses my year. And I got really interested in that and the whole building process and being able to, see the whole building and, pick apart different pieces and really study them. But then also watch it all come together. And since you're the one who designed it and you're also building it, you really get to know the project front and back. So that's what I really loved about my last year of school. And I feel like VDC is very similar to that. Once I came to PCL, this job, the Conrac job that I'm on now, I've been here since the beginning, since 2019. So I've seen the job since the very beginning, and it's really rewarding to see it come together now. We're finishing up the last bits and pieces of it. And yeah, I guess that's my story.
That's fantastic. And with this next question, feel free, I'll let you all jump in as you would like, because since Sydney, Dana, and Ryan have the same job title of VDC Specialists, and then John has VDC Manager, the next question is really about kind of your job title and your daily workflow. And obviously you're on different projects, so feel free to all chime in if you want, or to let someone speak on behalf of the group. But basically the question is, what is your current position and how would you describe your current work? And just for our architecture students, I'd also love to hear, Ryan, you distinguished between kind of the design architecture and VDC. If you want to speak more about that, I think that'd be helpful as well.
Am I going first? Is this me?
Go ahead, jump in.
Okay. So I think, what do I do? Oh gosh, that's a loaded question, right? So the really interesting thing is that maybe 5 years ago or more, the title VDC manager and what you were doing was really around the technology. And David, I think you're one of the professors that teaches like Revit and CAD and a lot of the architectural drafting classes at GCC.
Right, yes.
So, once upon a time when I was just out of school, like there was a big kind of shift going on between AutoCAD and Revit. And are you gonna do something where you're producing just 2D drawings like line work that means nothing other than how it's organized into layers? Or are you going to transition to a 3-dimensional model where you can click on a wall and it actually knows it's a wall and it can give you some information about its assembly? And so the collective design and construction industry was going through kind of a software existential crisis, where it was, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, and it's like, I don't know, Xbox versus PlayStation almost. And you would have people super entrenched on one side or the other. And some of it was just what they had used previously, and other folks argued features. But at the end of the day, as a VDC professional, you were in the middle of kind of this little culture war that was going on, trying to push your collective design and construction teams into a 3D model, into a more sophisticated way of working. So a lot of our work early on was around just, I don't know, I call it being a technological lifeguard and keeping the kids safe in the pool and making sure that the 3D process was successful, because everyone was like that close to just saying, forget it, I'm going back to AutoCAD. I know it, I like it. I don't want to be in this 3D thing anyways. I'm going home. I'm taking my toys with me. And so you had to kind of just be this tech lifeguard that kept everyone moving the process forward and moving into the 21st century. We're fortunate today because there's really, and that discussion I don't think has come up in the last 5 years. And so what that means is that as VDC professionals, we kind of have changed roles from being the tech lifeguards into being kind of a design and construction fixer. So I think that's a fair way to put it, right? Like we end up finding problems because we're the first people to see it, because we're seeing it in 3D before the rest of our teams are. So what that means for me is that when I'm sitting at a higher level in the process than Ryan, Dana, and Sydney, is that I'm starting to see where the design process is starting to split at the seams. I'm seeing where either the technology, the process, or the people are starting to experience friction, which honestly just comes from seat time, and it comes from repetition. One of the awesome things is that, as it was mentioned in my intro, I've been involved with $5 billion worth of construction projects. That's a little bit unfair because I had one $2 billion job in Texas. I had this job, which is $1 billion. So that's 3 billion right there. So, then I only have to really come up with another $2 billion worth of work. But 600 million here, 300 million there, it starts adding up. But the great thing is that in a relatively short amount of time, right? Like I joined the construction industry after graduating in 2007. So it's been less than 15 years, just barely. But in that amount of time to be involved with $5 billion worth of construction means that I've seen things go well, and I've seen where things start to, split at the seams. And with that experience, you start to kind of be able to sniff out when something is starting to go wrong before it actually goes wrong. And so that's, I think, where fundamentally my role sits as a VDC manager. But the exciting thing for me is that I get to watch Sydney, Ryan, and Dana go through that process, but they get to shortcut and accelerate off of what I had to experience, because they don't have to deal with the same level of technological handholding around, are we going to do this in 3D, or are we going to go back to, the Stone Age? So that's something that's really cool. And as a result, I think what y'all are able to dig into is the more meaningful side of the design and construction process. So, and you get to do it with computers that are like fabulously powerful compared to, like, my first BIM workstation, right? So David, you probably remember when, like, you know, your computer had a turbo button on the front of it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I go back a little bit further, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my first machine. It was a 486, like the DX2, a 33 megahertz processor. So
Mhm.
yeah, now you look at just an iPhone and it's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Fantastic.
did
That
I answer that
evolution.
question,
You
or did I
definitely
just
did.
ramble?
No,
All right.
no, you gave that evolution of the field. And so with
Mhm.
that being said, you actually tailored it off so well to be talking next about the VDC specialist role. So Sydney, Ryan, and Dana, I'll let whoever on mics first go ahead, but whoever feels like they want to talk about, you know, describing what you do and adding a little bit more detail of how that's been for you since you started.
I'll start just talking about this contract job, the $1 billion job that I'm at. So mainly my role has been to facilitate coordination between the design team and our trades, which basically means I get to sit in coordination meetings with all of them and go through the model with them and kind of unpack it and work through some of the constructability questions and issues that come up, and also untangle a lot of clashes that we come across. Because a lot of times when we put all these models together, we have the plumbers and the electricians who don't really look at each other's models, so they just decide to model their systems everywhere. So we kind of come in and untangle everything and make sure everything works and every system has its own space. So that's been a big part of my role for probably the first year and a half or so of this job. And the second half, I feel like, has been a lot of collecting as-built data. So I get to take out laser scanners to the field and basically collect what's been built out there and compare it back to our model. And a lot of that as-built data is also useful for archive purposes. And so we get to look at in the future how everything was put together and built without having to go out in the field. So that's been a big part of my role too.
Yeah, it's incredible just being able to close the loop on creating a design in 3D, planning it out, and then being able to actually go and check that work and show when it's been installed correctly or when something needs to be adjusted due to the realities of living in an imperfect world with, you know, dimensional tolerances, or somebody reading a shop drawing and installing a pipe backwards. Fitting was supposed to go left and now it went right. What do you do?
Sounds like our students here, you'll want to make sure you put problem solving on your resume.
Yes. Yeah.
So
No,
with that being said, did anyone want to add anything else to VDC specialist before we move on to our next question?
I have nothing to add. I think Dana summed it up pretty well.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. And just for the sake of time, I think it will help us to move ahead because our next question is similar, not just what you do, but basically some of the things that you really enjoy about your work and some of the challenges you've faced in your work. Our students often like to know that. So with this one, since we haven't heard from Ryan or Sydney next, let's start with one of you.
Yeah, so you kind of said it right a minute ago, problem solving. I think that's one of my favorite parts of this job is the kind of creative problem solving. And it's also like really rewarding to get people together who might not see eye to eye and get them to, you know, compromise and shuffle their design around to make something work. So it's always kind of like those little wins every day that make the job really rewarding, and but it's also challenging. So it's kind of that double-edged sword there. But I think that's just the day-to-day coordination and communication and problem solving is is something I really enjoy as part of the job.
Awesome. I'll leave it kind of open if anyone wants to jump in with another thing you really enjoy or any of the challenges you faced.
Yeah, I'll just add that one thing that I've really enjoyed is just being able to use technology to accomplish tasks. So like Dana had mentioned, the laser scanner to collect as-built data. I just think in the VDC role, you get a lot of cool toys to play with. So like the laser scanner would be one. The Conrack project didn't have any drones because it was close to the airport, but flying drones for, getting site photos and site analysis through the drone technology is something that's really interesting to me, as well as like all these softwares that we get to use that are past Revit. And one thing I would say about that is don't be intimidated by the softwares, because you'll pick it up within a week and pretty soon you'll be an expert at it. So in addition to Revit, we use programs like Navisworks for clash detection. We're using a program called Revisto for clash detection now, which is like a beefed up Navisworks. We use Twinmotion, which uses a video game engine to create unique looking renderings and site logistics plans and stuff like that. So really, I get to dig into a lot of the programs that architects use and just use them in different ways that kind of have helped me understand architecture a little bit better as well, because we're using it in a different application, which is great. But
fantastic. I love y'all staying on the positive side. Before we move on to the next question, I want to talk about a challenge you faced or any struggles you have with your role or your field.
I'll speak to that just because I've recently graduated and I studied architecture, and now I'm in the construction and contracting side. I kind of felt like I had no idea what language these people were speaking. When you're talking to the trades and they're talking with electrical engineers, and I came in and was like, how am I going to do this? I don't even know what they're talking about. But it just, you learn every single day, and you just have to take it like one day at a time. And something that that helps with those challenges is having like a really great support system here at PCL. Ryan and Dana and John, like they were there every step of the way of onboarding and training. So I think that was one of very difficult part of joining VDC, coming from an architectural background, but it's nothing that anyone couldn't do.
I think that's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so this next one, I'll probably throw to John first. It's kind of a longer question, but basically what qualifications, education level, training, certifications, licenses, experience, things like that. What are required for entry into this kind of field? And if you participate in hiring, what impresses you the most when considering hiring someone?
So I think that the qualifications are fairly open-ended. Like clearly I have a degree in business administration, and that's got nothing to it. My wife is a licensed architect, so I always joke that I am the underachiever in the family. But I think that the qualifications, like if you're so inclined, looking at after GCC, looking at like a MARC program or something like that, where you can really understand the design process from an academic perspective, I think that's great. One of my favorite things, and you heard a common theme from Sydney, Ryan, and Dana, that they all have their MARCs from the University of Kansas. And the thing that draws me to that program is that they have to eat their own dog food. And what I mean by that is that they've gone through the process of designing something, and then they had to build it. So they've taken a very heavy theoretical concept of creating something out of nothing, and then had to go through the physical exercise of actually turning it into something. And that's great because it really points out where you had gaps in your thinking, where that design was missing that final element to connect A to B. And also it teaches you a lot, because it's a group project, it teaches you a lot about working with others and finding your own internal motivation. So those are all things that I look for. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that y'all have to go and do a 2-year MArch in Kansas to get there, but finding a program or an experience that allows you to take a theoretical thing and make it something real, I think is incredibly important, because there's so many problems that come up when you actually try to build something, and understanding not necessarily what all those problems are, but just being able to understand how to figure out, I have this thing on my screen and I'm trying to turn it into something real out there. And how do I get from point A to point B? So that's my answer. Is that good? I feel like I'm
Yeah, you
taking
really
a big
captured,
thing and trying
yeah,
to turn it into something that you can fit on a bumper sticker.
the theoretical to the practical. That definitely makes sense. And I think that's something that is good for our students to keep in mind as they make decisions about what further education they are planning to pursue. So perfect. Thank you so much. This next one, I think maybe I will have Sydney, Dana, and Ryan focus on, which is there anything you wish you knew about your field or career when you were a college student? And so I think Sydney spoke last. Dana, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. One thing I wish I knew about this.
I want to hear this answer.
Probably like how much problem solving is involved in this, and not just in like helping, designers and trades work through the design of the project, but also because our VDC group is so small, a lot of times we kind of have to work through technological issues or, problems that come up on our own. We're like our own little IT group. So a lot of it is, trying to understand the technology behind it all and understand like how it works. But at the same time, it's not intimidating because as, being an architecture student, I was used to working in Revit and all these different softwares, but coming here, it was kind of a step up, using the laser scanner out there. And then also we have a total station. So when, challenges come up in the field, you kind of have to work through it. And, you have a team that you can ask to figure out, what's going on and, how you can work through it. But yeah, I guess that's one thing I wish I knew was like how much problem solving was going to be involved.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Did Sydney or Ryan, did you have anything different you wanted to add?
I think I would just say that when I was back in college studying architecture, a lot of the focus was on design and not so much what goes into making a building work, and stuff like studying wall sections and stuff like that wasn't really that high of a priority. So looking back at it now, I wish I would have taken a course on something like reading drawing details or how to read construction documents, because that's something you're going to be staring at a lot and having to interpret and understand. And that's something I never really had exposure to or went out of my way to expose myself to those documents. So I would say that more technical stuff like that, I wish I would have kind of focused on a little bit more, because you do use architectural drawings, civil drawings, electrical line drawings that I'd never paid attention to before, that suddenly you're responsible for making sure that the conduit lines are running to where they're supposed to go to. So read this line drawing, and not having that exposure kind of was a little scary at first. So I'm just thinking to myself, what am I looking at right now? So I just say that getting exposure to kind of real world documents the industry uses is something that'll help you out going forward.
That's great to know, Ryan. And I see Professor Martin nodding, because we do have a class like that in our architecture program. So that's fantastic.
I
Yeah,
can
Dave-
also add on to that and say that understanding MEP systems and how they work would have also been super helpful. Because as you're working through like untangling a whole mess of MEP systems, it's nice to know like how it actually works and what your constraints are and what you can do. And I think I only took one class in college that went over MEP systems and how they work. So that would have been nice to know too.
What is a chiller, and does all it do is chill? Like,
And I think there's
Yeah.
always going to be that transition into industry where there's tools or things that you aren't familiar with.
mhm.
But it is very good to know, students listening in, that you'll actually use some of these classes, a good amount of classes. David, did you want to remind us what number class that is?
Well, we do have you're talking about the print reading class,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Architecture 108. It's currently taught online only, 100%. So the lectures are pre-recorded, that kind of thing. But the current text I'm using has both residential and commercial drawings. And it's challenging to me to teach it, and it goes into concepts as well. So it's a good course to get somebody, really familiar with these plans in a 16-week class. It's a good class.
Thank
I
you.
see you
I
also
was
have,
gonna
you
say
got an
the-
ARC 106 too. You got a building codes.
Right. We do the building code, which covers the current version of, I'm teaching that right now.
Mhm.
Covers the current building code. And I wanted to say about the MEP also, we do offer an MEP class, but we haven't been able to fill it. We do get some working professionals that have graduated from architecture school that are working in the field that need this. But unfortunately, the demand isn't enough for the class to actually get enough students. But yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Dana. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm glad we have you here, Professor Martin. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And we're almost at the time where we're going to open it up to student questions, and we already have one ready. So that's fantastic. So I'm going to jump ahead to our last pre-established question, which is a general advice question, which is, what advice would you give to students looking to enter this career? You've already given some great chunks of information about it's okay to not know, and what kind of things in school to look out for, and what kind of problem solving skills to develop. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you really want to leave our students with before we go into the student-driven question portion?
I think, for me, I think that the really big thing is it's okay to say yes to something. Like be willing to take something on as long as you have support, right? Like I think Sydney, Dana, and Ryan, there's times when I've asked you to do stuff that I know you've never done it before, right? But it's one of these things where the fact that you're willing to say, yeah, I'll give that a shot. I'm not sure where to start on it, but like, if you can send me in the right direction on it, I'll take it. And that's more of an attitude than necessarily a skill set, right? Like that, there's no class called ARC 204 saying yes to things you don't necessarily understand how to do, right? And so I think having an attitude where you're willing to dive into something and solve a problem is fantastic. And the thing to remember is that if you don't tackle that, if you don't try to slay that dragon, odds are that there's nobody else on the project who's better suited to do it. And the reason why I say that is the construction industry is in the middle of a very interesting time, because we've got a seasoned number of gray-haired professionals who are getting ready to retire in the next 10 years. And that is going to create a massive labor shortage within our industry. And so getting in and being willing to take on new tasks and take on new responsibilities is pretty much going to be standard operating procedure for you all your entire careers, because there is going to be such a senior leadership vacuum that is going to occur at every rung of the ladder in our industry amongst both design and construction professionals. So it's exciting and scary all at the same time, but all you got to do is say yes.
That's such a great point, and a great, from your context being in the field for a while, you can project that into the future and watch that happening. So it's good for our students to get a sneak peek of that. Does anyone else want to add any other general advice for our students attending today?
Ask for help when you need it. Like, don't just sit there and like suffer in silence. Like, that's not, like, if you get stuck, like, shoot off a flare. What else, Sydney, Ryan, Dana, anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say just to not be afraid to ask questions, because I mean, John kind of talked about what I was thinking, but especially just being new to the industry and new to the job and new to professional life in general, there's a lot outside of even just this specific career that, you know, you're trying to tackle all at the same time as trying to be, you know, showing up for work and succeeding at work. So you know, just to ask questions and to be open to advice and criticism, or not criticism, but constructive criticism.
Fantastic. Any last, Dana or Ryan, any last thoughts on this question?
I think I would just maybe say, don't be afraid if an opportunity comes up for something that you weren't planning for. I mean, I never thought I was going to be a VDC specialist going through architecture school, but the opportunity came up for me to go off and do something different. And I took that opportunity, and it led me down a road that really kind of expanded my knowledge of the industry. So don't think that just because you know, are an architecture student, you have to, you know, be an architect. There's plenty of things that, you know, and opportunities that you can encounter. So I'd say just always keep an open mind for opportunities that come your way.
I think that's a great note to end our kind of facilitated portion on. And so now we're going to open it up to questions from our students. So we already had one in the chat earlier. Noreen says, hi everyone, interior design major here. I have a question about Revit and AutoCAD. We usually learn Revit as our main program, but do you think it would be useful to take a few courses in AutoCAD just to have the basic skills? Or should I just focus on building my Revit skills?
Sydney, Dana, Ryan, did you guys like really learn AutoCAD at all? I mean, clearly I didn't. Like, the business admin didn't do anything for me.
I don't think we had a class like to learn any of the software.
Yeah,
we definitely didn't. I think
y'all are spoiled. You got David. You don't know how good you have it.
I would say
wasn't even a thing.
Revit's the main program that I work in.
Yeah.
But I do have AutoCAD, and that's mostly for if I get in drawings from consultants and I need to open it in AutoCAD and print something off or export it to a different file type. I'm not really working in AutoCAD. I mainly use it as like a liaison to another software, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I mean, you get through what you need to do in AutoCAD pretty much by using like YouTube tutorials, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do I do this? How do I move the origin point of an AutoCAD file? And it's like, you're in and out of it pretty quick. I will say I had to spend a little bit of quality time in AutoCAD recently because we had to, we actually had to go and replot our Staples Center DWGs from when PCL originally built, I guess it's crypto.com now, but it was a Staples Center then in 1998. So that was a fun little trip down memory lane, but replotting a massive DWG set to PDF. But I'd say don't worry about taking a course in AutoCAD. I would focus on Revit. I would look at other tools like David. I don't know if you're teaching like Lumion or Twinmotion or anything like that.
Yes, we are.
But those tools are incredibly powerful. The graphical engine that's present in those platforms just makes everything else look like it belongs in a museum, not in a functioning piece of software.
Fantastic. What I'm going to do now is turn off the recording so that, any students who do want to like speak up and ask their own questions have that opportunity. So if you're watching this recording later, thank you so much for watching. And just know if you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to our CE counselor team, but I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off.